There are a couple of significant events in the history, in the life of Jesus. And an event is significant when it had a certain impact on those that were involved at the time, but also if it has an impact on those that reads about it in later years. And if we use that as a measure, there are a couple of significant events. And one of those events is this, the Palm Sunday event that we celebrate this morning. And Jesus, as you can see on the picture, coming into Jerusalem and the people putting down their clothes and palm leaves in front of him, creating the entrance of a hero or a king. Now, there were different reasons that Jesus was crucified that day. On the side of the Romans, he was a rebel. And the Roman Empire made no secret about how they go about with rebels. They crucified them by the hundreds and sometimes by the thousands. Across the Roman Empire, any people that stood up against the authority of the day were met by the crucifixion. And Jesus was seen by them as a rebel. Because here he comes into Jerusalem, stirring up people, the very people that were stirred up a couple of years before that during the Maccabean revolt and throwing the Greeks out of Jerusalem and out of the temple. Maybe they were planning to throw the Romans or to try and throw the Romans out of Jerusalem. Hence, the Jerusalem leadership of the Roman Empire saw Jesus not only as a traitor, but also as a rebel, a good candidate to be put on the cross in Jerusalem. Apart from the Roman Empire, the Jews also did not like this guy very much. They had a total different expectation of the coming of Jesus. They thought he will be the Old Testament Messiah, the one that the Old Testament speaks of when the Old Testament says he will come as a king, he will smite his enemies, he will defeat them, and he will sit in the temple in Jerusalem. Yet here he comes, humbly on the back of a donkey, everything in the opposite than what they expected in those days. The Sadducees, the Pharisees, and even the high priest did not like this man because he was not the answer that they brought to the people when they need to look out for the future coming of the Messiah. And then there were the ordinary people, the people around Jesus on that day. On the western side of the city of Jerusalem, Pontius Pilate were entering as the ruler of, or the governor of the Roman Empire in Jerusalem, coming back from his winter holiday just before the festival of the Passover. Why? Because he expected an uprising from these Jewish people under his rule. That's why he returned in military pomp, fanfare and trumpets probably blowing, and soldiers on horseback, and he himself probably in a litter carried by the Hebrew slaves of the day. So it's a total different picture of what happened on the western side of Jerusalem than the eastern side, where Jesus sent his disciples out to collect a humble donkey with a message, "I come in peace." That is what such an entry on the back of a donkey would mean. And then the reaction of the crowd, putting out the palm leaves, laying it in front of Jesus, putting even their cloaks there to celebrate this coming, because they had in their minds still the hope that he will be that Messiah, that one that will come and throw off the political rulership of the Romans of the day in Jerusalem. They expected a Messiah that would be a political king and leader, one that will defeat the enemy, one that will sit on the throne of his father David. Only the emperor of the day, or the ruler and governor in Jerusalem, could be celebrated like this, welcoming into the city with clothes on the road and palm trees. So why did these people do it? Because all of them had choices. And sadly, all of them, their choices were not met. Their choices were not answered. Their hopes did not come to fruition. Because this Jesus on the back of a donkey was not what they expected him to be. Jesus also had some choices to make. He could have easily slipped in a side entrance of the city of Jerusalem without being noticed by anybody. He could have taken his disciples and went into the festival of the Pesach in an upper room of an unknown person, quietly and silently. He did not. He chose a parable, because that's the way he did it in those days. He was an Essene, and the Essenes, as we know by now, preached and taught in parables. So Jesus used a parable to bring the specific message to the people that he wanted them to understand in that day. A metaphor speaking to the hearts of the people rather than to the political expectations. And therefore he had the choice. When the Pharisees told him, "Silence your people," he didn't do that. He said, "We had a message to bring, and if they don't call it out, the rocks alongside the road will do it. I'm not going to silence them." In all of this, Jesus had certain choices that he made, specifically for a specific reason. Unafraid, he faced the city of Jerusalem, the chaos, the festivals, the Romans, the Pharisees, all of his enemies. He faced straight on the back of a donkey. Silently, he came into that city by choice. The crowd had a choice. Just by showing up, we referred to the danger of following a rebel. You could have easily been crucified by the Romans. We saw that later when people would ask the disciples, "Are you not a follower of this person they call Jesus?" And then even Peter saying, "Oh no, I don't know him." There was a definite fear in the people of the time due to this brutality of the Roman Empire. And yet they showed up. They came. And they had a choice to be quiet and subdued and welcome him amongst them, but they chose to go all the way, with the palm leaves and the clothes in front of him. They had a parade. The disciples had a choice. And Jesus asked them, "Who do you say I am?" And then we read in Mark 8, verses 27 to 29, the following. Jesus and his disciples went on to the village around Caesarea Philippi, and on the way he asked them, "Who do people say I am?" And they replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" And Peter answered, "You are the Messiah." And with that statement, they walked down to Jerusalem on their journey towards the cross on that fateful Friday. They walked into Jerusalem for the Holy Week that we celebrate this week in our church calendars. But I have to show you on a mistake in this Mark 8. In the Aramaic and Greek text, it reads, "Peter answered, 'You are the Christ.'" The word Messiah does not appear in the original Aramaic or Greek text. If you go and read other English translations, some of them would say this, "You are the Messiah." And some of them would say, "You are the Christ." And that is quite confusing, because that is the choice that we stand in front of today. All the choices the people of the time made were not met. All of them were disappointed. The Jewish people, saying through the mouth of Peter in this translation, "You are the Messiah," expected that Messiah. Do you know what palm trees meant in the day when Jesus lived in Jerusalem? It was a token or a way to celebrate something. They celebrated the liberation of Jerusalem through the Maccabean revolt year after year after year by taking palm leaves and going into the streets and silently wave them. It was a statement by the Jewish people of the time to say, "Look at us. 160 years ago, the Maccabeans revolted. We freed Jerusalem. We took back our temple. We can do it again. It was both a political statement and a statement of saying we have the power if we stand together to do something extraordinary. That is what palm leaves meant in the time of Jesus. And if we stand in front of the choice, what does this Palm Sunday mean to us? What do we answer on the question of Jesus? What do you say who I am? That is the choice we have to make. What does these palm leaves mean to you? The Romans were in total control of Jerusalem. They even controlled through Herod the temple of the Jewish people. They were taxing the Jewish ordinary folk. They had their fingers in the coffers of the temple through taxes and through probably a lot of bribes. It was not a beautiful picture. These people were paying everywhere the Romans. And for them to take up the leaves silently every year saying we protest like we did through the Maccabean revolt is something extraordinary and very dangerous. And that's why some translations would translate Mark 8 verse 27 to 29 as Peter said, "You are the Messiah." That is not what is standing there. That is what the Jewish people of the time believed, that Jesus was this Messiah that the Old Testament spoke of. But that is not what Jesus' metaphor through the entering into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday taught or said to the people of the day. He demonstrated what the original text said. You are the Christ. And that's your choice today. Who is Jesus to you? What does he mean to you? Is he this Messiah? Are you expecting him to come back on the clouds to come and free Jerusalem again and make the kingdom of Israel great again, sitting on the throne of his father David, taking control of the temple? Is that the Messiah that you expect in the future? Because that is what the Messiah means. So if that is your choice, that is your expectation for the future of your faith and this world. And if you choose that, then crucifixion takes on that meaning. That Jesus came as the Messiah, the one that overcame death and sin. He is the King on the cross. The moment you choose Messiah from the Old Testament. So what happens if we choose the other one? Which clearly Peter understood at this stage when he said, "You are the Christ and not the Messiah." There's a deeper and soft and beautiful message in the entering of Jesus into Jerusalem, into the heart of the Jewish faith of the day. That's where the temple was. That's where they believed God lived. That is the heartbeat of the Jewish faith. And that is why for some, they wanted to free it politically. Jesus was never a political rebel. He was never a political king that came about to bring a political kingdom into being. He was always the Christ. And the Christ is subtle. The Christ is humble. The Christ shows service rather than war. The Christ brought love rather than anger and hatred. Doesn't matter what the circumstances was, that is what the Christ in the form of Jesus brought. And him entering on the other side of the political entrance of Pontius Pilate on the western side of Jerusalem is demonstrating that I am anti that. I am not with that entrance of a political leader. I come humbly on the back of a donkey, bringing peace and showing the way of service, of humility, of love, of caring for the people of the day. And inside of you is this Christ. Because inside of you is this breath of God that gives you life. That is who you are. And if we choose the other way, then we miss this. If we choose the political Messiah, we miss this. And what does it mean? Christ inside you, the divine breath of God inside you, it doesn't demand attention. It does not arrive in pomp and political fare. It arrives humbly and silently in your life. It's waiting to be noticed. It's waiting to be welcomed. It's waiting for your call to embrace it, and when you embrace it, to awaken it. And it's waiting silently within your heart. Like Jesus was silently on his way, humbly. The people didn't understand it. The people didn't see him in that way. But that doesn't mean he understood it differently, because Jesus Christ is the humble King in your heart that brings love, compassion, and service to others. That is what he stood for. They swayed the palm trees, saying, "Look at us. We will rise. We will free ourselves like our forebears did in the time of the Greeks." They said, "You are the Messiah, and we will scream it out in the streets of Jerusalem, fearless in the face of the Roman Empire." And what happened when Jesus entered? They all disappeared. They all went into hiding, because that is not an answer. That is just a temporary answer. The true answer lays in the fact of what this picture tells us. Christ is within you. That is who you are. And that's your choice. Nobody makes you to choose something specific. Nobody will force you to make even a choice. It invites you. Jesus invites you this morning to make that choice, because then this Holy Week get a whole new meaning. It's a week where we walk confidently towards a cross where Jesus demonstrated, "I don't fear death because I cannot die, because I am the very breath of God. You cannot kill me. You cannot be killed. You live forever. We all live forever." And by acknowledging that, by embracing that which is already within you, Christ come to life in this world. And that is what we need to do. That is what this world needs desperately. Christ to come alive. Humble, peaceful, filled with love and compassion, in service to others. Amen.